Well, the Senate held a confirmation hearing today for Betsy Devos. She's Donald Trump's pick to be Secretary of Education. Devos has spent many millions of her own money promoting charter schools, school vouchers, and other forms of school choice. That, of course, makes her the bitter enemy of unionized teachers who are fighting hard to block her nomination. One of Devos' biggest critics does not work for a teachers union. He's a Tulane University economics professor, Douglas Harris, and he's written multiple articles about school choice, many of them criticizing her, Betsy DeVos, and saying that her way is the wrong way to fix American schools. Professor Harris joins us tonight from New Orleans. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Tucker, thanks for having me.
So you don't seem like a reflexive opponent of trying something different in the public schools. What exactly is your problem with Betsy DeVos's approach?
Yeah, I agree that there need to be changes, and I think even her starting point for this with school choice is a good starting point. You know, the problem is that's also the ending point. You know, that's the one principle, and there aren't other principles that need to go along with this. You know, so choice, and we've seen this in other places. We've seen it with vouchers. We've seen it with the virtual schools that she supported. We've seen it with some versions of charter schools, including some in Michigan, where the market is left to roam on its own in a Wild West fashion, and it just doesn't generate good results. So in the lead-in, it suggested that all this criticism is from the left, but actually the concerns that I have are much more pragmatic.
Yeah, no, and I try to make that clear. I don't think that you're a teachers union hack, and I don't know what your politics are, but I take your criticism seriously because I think it is serious. But you said this in a piece that you wrote about the school choice experiment in the city of Detroit. You said of the results, one well-regarded study found that Detroit's charter schools performed at about the same dismal level as its traditional public schools. That doesn't seem like that much of an indictment, actually. Its schools are, I think, the worst in America, certainly close. 4% pass the math proficiency in 8th grade. And so if the results are not worse, but parents have a choice, why is it not a good starting place for school reform?
Well, first of all, in Detroit, if you look at where the city is compared to other urban districts, Detroit is by far the lowest performing district in the country, and there's no debate about that. And the charter experiment in the city has been going on for 20 years. The logic of choice and the logic of free market competition is that it's supposed to make the whole system work better, that you introduce new operators, new kinds of organizations. There it's mostly for-profit organizations. That's going to create competition with the public schools, and everybody's going to get better. This has been going on for 20 years, and Detroit is still by far the worst performing district in the country in these urban schools. So if it was going to work, I think that it's had its chance.
But it has worked. No, but hold on. I mean, I think maybe both of us are assuming that schools can fix the problem. I mean, let's be totally honest. If you take a population that has a whole lot of other problems going on, and no intact families and poverty and all the problems in Detroit, it's pretty tough for schools to fix that. But isn't it true that in a lot of other places, in your city, New Orleans, here in Washington, alternatives to traditional public education charter schools have really worked? And she's for that.
That's
right.
So
why is that bad?
Well, because they're actually two completely different kinds of systems. So Detroit and New Orleans and these other cities are really a tale of two cities. You know, Detroit's system is much more like a voucher system where the money goes to the schools and and there's no oversight, there's no coordination of the system. New Orleans is quite different, and as is D.C. In New Orleans, there's a centralized enrollment system to make sure that all students are being served. There's a centralized discipline system so that schools can't just get rid of students and kick them out because they're disruptive. There's a little bit of oversight. There's still choice. There are no attendance zones. Families can choose the schools that they want. But there's also somebody minding the store to make sure that all students are being served. And
I'm aware of all that, and I agree with all that, and I think those are all good. But what Detroit and New Orleans and Washington all have in common is there alternatives to the teachers union-run monopoly that has really hurt students in a lot of other American cities. And Betsy DeVos, at the broadest level, is for trying something new, unlike, I would say, virtually every other Secretary of Education I've seen. So why isn't it good? Why isn't she an improvement over what we've had?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's fair. I don't think anybody would argue that, say, Arne Duncan and John King, the last two secretaries of education, were not in favor of changing things. They changed a lot and under great controversy. And they've been very controversial. They've been very aggressive, especially at the federal level, and it's been the federal involvement that's been the challenge. You know, but back to DeVos, the issue here isn't about whether we need to improve schools. The issue is in the cities where they're not functioning well. And a lot of places, the public schools are doing fine. It's in the places where they're not doing well that there should be some intervention. That choice is a good starting point, but it can't be the ending point, that we need to go further. We still need to have a role for government. It just needs to be different than the way it has worked so far.
I agree with you there. Doug, thanks a lot. Nice to have you.